Rom-Com Month, everybody. We are doing 28 Days of Love, and today is day 7. I'm your host, Melissa Forziat. I'm a keynote speaker. When I speak, my topic is Take the Doughnut. It's another way to say Carpe Diem. And it comes from this weird thing that happened in college. I left a real donut on a table, and that became an object lesson for me and what it looks like to leave an opportunity behind. So now I want to take the donut. From time to time, I'll give myself a challenge. If there's something that I want to do, I'll make it a Take the Doughnut challenge, just to make it official and to hold myself accountable to it. But this time I'm opening up this challenge to anybody who wants to join. So we're doing 28 days of love, 28 days of rom-coms. Again, today's day 7. We're going to talk about burlesque. I'm going to do this one a little differently. I do have not just one, but 3 guests for this one. And because I had 3 guests for this one, I structured it differently. So the format of these is I share 10 things that I love about the film. When I have a guest, they do 5, I do 5. I have 3 people, and I want to talk about this film too. So here's what I'm doing today. I'm going to share real quick 10 things that I love about the film Burlesque. And then I am bringing in 3 different burlesque performers to share their favorite things or things that really strike them about this movie. So I'll share my list first, and then one after another, we're going to hear from some amazing people in the burlesque community all about what they think about this film. So that's the format for today. And so just real quick, just to set the stage here, Burlesque is a film from 2010. It was directed and written by Steve Anton. It stars, now this is a cast, let me tell you. It stars Cher as Tess, Christina Aguilera as Allie, Cam Gigandet as Jack, Ellen Cumming as Alexis, Eric Dane as Marcus, Julianne Hough as Georgia, Peter Gallagher as Vince, Kristen Bell as Nikki, Stanley Tucci as Sean. It's unbelievable the people they got to be in this film. People who are all very talented in their sphere, and then they brought them all together to do this sort of like all around performance based movie. And so I'm going to share my list, and then let me tell you who's to come. So we are going to hear from Jezebelly AKA Iridessence. We're going to hear from Jessabelle Thunder, and we're going to hear from Pearls Daly, who are all burlesque performers from different parts of the US, to get their thoughts on the film as well. Let me start with my own top 10 list of 10 things that I love about the movie Burlesque. I will say before I get into it, this is a movie that I don't hear a lot of people talking about. And I don't know if it's exactly a rom-com. It's got romance, it's got comedy, it's a rom-com. But I absolutely wanted it on my list, and I wanted to make sure that people who find this series find this movie. And it's fun. It's like so many rom-coms. It asks you not to take it overly seriously, but it gives you a lot of reward for that. Some people who know me well might say, Melissa, there's a musical on your list. That's bananas. You don't like musicals. I don't, but I have this subcategory that does work for me of when something is a musical, but there's a reason why people are singing and performing on stage, then it works for me usually. And so I actually really enjoy this film. Almost all of the musical numbers work for me. There's one that does feel a little bit contrived for me when it's a Tess solo, because it felt like they needed a Cher song and she's going to do like, she's going to practice it. That was the only one for me that was like, okay, I think we're going into the territory of musicals that I don't normally do. But I actually really enjoy this film, and I'm going to talk about why. So on my top 10 list, I've got a range of things that are very specific, like specific lines, things that are bigger picture, specific numbers that I wanted to highlight. And because I've already had the conversation with the performers that I'll be talking to, I'm going to try as much as possible not to replicate things that they talked about unless I just could not stand not having it on my list. So, top 10 things that I love about this film. Number 10, I'm actually going to start with one of the things we see early in the film. The whole mood of the Welcome to Burlesque number when Allie first walks into the burlesque lounge. She's found her way to this new place. She's interacting with Alexis, Alan Cumming's character, for the very first time. Um, Tess is singing. Julianne Hough is right up front in the center, just the choreography of this number. I have something of a dance background, and I really love watching dance, and this film has a lot of great choreography. And whether you're watching the people in the front or the background dancers, whoever you're watching, it's interesting. So I really like this number because it's got this moody vibe. It's very precise. There's a little bit of like a jazz element to it, and it feels moody. And I tend to like stuff that's like that, especially in terms of dance and music. So the fact that Allie walks into the burlesque lounge and this is the first thing that draws her in felt like it drew me in as well. I think it was a very well chosen number. I'm going to talk about more numbers as we go on, but first I'm going to go to number 9. There's a line that Cher says there, well, that Tess says to Allie when Allie is auditioning formally. And Tess says, you've got to make me believe that you belong up there. Show me that. I spliced a couple lines together. But this idea that very rarely do people just welcome us with open arms to a new opportunity. Sometimes you have to prove yourself. Sometimes you have to fake it till you make it or have confidence that you haven't really earned yet, but there's no other way forward. And I think it was a real lesson for Allie that as much you can do as much research as you want, which she was doing, but at some point you have to get on stage and convince me I should be watching you. And I think this is true. It's been true for me in my speaking career, but I think it's true for a lot of us in a lot of ways. People are looking to know that they've made a good investment in their time if they're paying attention to something. And so sometimes you have to say, no, this is a good investment of your time. And here's why. I'm just going to do the thing and show you. So I like that Tess makes that point. I'm going to go from there to number 8. I'm going to keep it on Tess, but I'm going to go Tess and Sean. I like the very lived in feeling of their relationship with each other. I love Stanley Tucci being in this movie. I love their dynamic together. I think they have a really good chemistry with each other. And, we get it with little lines like, Tess is like, take out in a movie. And we get Sean saying, yeah, Casablanca and Oreos, like every other Friday or whatever day of the week it is. You just know that this feels like a friendship that you want to have with somebody, to have that history, to have that familiarity. They know exactly what the other one needs. They're there for each other in all the right ways. So I love this friendship and I love them playing it. Okay, number 7. Let's talk a little bit about Allie. Something I enjoy about this film, and you may find this theme running through quite a lot of my rom-com month choices. Allie is opinionated, and she is brazen, and she's bold, and she speaks her mind, and I never stop liking her. You can have all of those things in a character, female, male, whatever. They can be bold and say what they think and still lovable. And you know what? I don't have to love characters in every movie. I often find it very interesting to have anti-heroes or people who are flawed. But I think that it is nice to see this example of a character who has she's gonna go get him. She's gonna she's sometimes gonna be speaking out of her pay grade or whatever it is that Tess says in the movie. But she is always charming in her way. I never stop liking her. Okay, number 6, and this is something that I can relate to. There's this montage to a song called Ray of Light by Madonna, where Allie is now she's been hired. She's officially one of the performers, and she's working on all the numbers. She's going to practices. She's learning the dances. She's really perfecting them, and then she's starting to perform them. All of that's happening in this montage. What I love about the montage, first of all, the energy of the song is great, but also I love that Ali is working on these dances as she's walking through the streets of LA. Like whenever she needs to go somewhere, she's working on the dances and you can see her sort of moving. I've done this. There's no cool way to work on choreography while walking on a busy street. But sometimes you just got to do it. Sometimes your brain is there, you're thinking about it, and your arms are moving, and it's not quite in time to the steps that you're walking, and there might be people around you, but such is life, okay? So for me, that was actually very relatable. And I loved that I was able to see somebody doing that because it wasn't in the context of sometimes you'll see movies where they'll like have a character break into a dance number. Actually, this happened in 500 Days of Summer, where like there's this moment where the character is celebrating and he sort of breaks into a dance number, and it's meant to show like he's just interacting in a positive way with the world around him. But this wasn't about interacting. This is about Ali being in her own space, in her own head, and working things out around with people physically around her. Okay, number 5 on my list. We need to address Kristen Bell being in this film as Nikki. My favorite line from Nikki, she tries to completely tank Allie's opportunity of being on stage, and it backfires because it turns out Allie has a great voice, and she just brings the house down with it in her tough lumber number. And afterwards, Nikki comes up to her because now this has created the door for Allie to be the star of the show moving forward. Nikki comes up and says, "Clearly, one of us has underestimated the other." Talk about you can't even tolerate owning this when you're speaking it. There's a she's she just is very reluctantly giving a little nod of respect, but she won't even own which one of us has underestimated the other. She does not want to give this one to Ellie. It's such a it's such a I don't know if passive aggressive is even the right term here for this. Nikki is just she's seething, but she has to give a little credit where it's due, but not much, okay? And I'm not saying which one of us is giving credit. All right. Number 4, I want to address another one of the numbers that's amazing to me. And this one, it's surprising that this one is amazing to me because it doesn't involve dance. The Bound to You song. Christina Aguilera in that green dress with that flower in her hair, just on stage singing. It's this probably the simplest number in the whole show, in the whole movie. I don't know, maybe Tessa's song as well. It's one of the simplest songs and numbers in the entire movie. And boy, does it stand out. And I think it's good in terms of the pacing of it because we've seen a lot of really busy numbers with a lot of performers. And so to have something that's really stripped down and just, one person on stage singing. And, Christina Aguilera has the most incredible, powerful voice. She's so talented. And so I think to see this number without the bells and whistles for a moment just sort of lets that shine. And by the way, this song is actually, if you remember earlier in the film, you see Jack kind of working on a piece, and it's this song. And now we're seeing it fleshed out. Okay, that brings me to number 3, Cam Gigandet, right? Um, I really like him in this role, and I I instantly think he's a like this is it. This is the relationship. I'm interested in his character. I think he's the good guy, a good guy, even though there's weird stuff happening with his ending previous relationship or current relationship. I find him likable, which is fascinating for me because the other thing that I know him from is the OC. And while he's, I'm sure, done many other projects, I know him from this and from the OC, where you might say he's a less likable character. Um, he tries to bring nuance to that role as well, but I think it was written in such a way that it's meant to be less likable. So for me to be just like instantly convinced by Jack is kind of a feat. And I really appreciate that. Cam Gigandet kind of I don't know, changed my mind, but he got me looking at him in a new way right from the moment this movie started. Um, Also, I mean, him going out in the rain to bring Allie back to his place. Okay, all right. It doesn't often rain like that in LA, but if it gives us this moment, that's fine. Okay, number two, I'm going to close this out with two of the best numbers for me of this film. Number two is the Express number. Um, Mostly, partly because of the mood, mostly because of the choreography. There are some really interesting ideas here that I love. There's a real sort of pensive, slow movement happening here. Once again, kind of moody, a little jazzy. Um, the dance is so solid. There's a moment as we get towards the end of the dance, there's a moment where there's this formation where Allie is right in the center, and there are dancers all around her, some facing towards the audience, some with their back to the audience, and they go to the side, they go back, and they're sort of like, I'm not going to try to do it here because look, I'm not in a group, but I love that idea. I love the shapes of it. And then following that, there's a moment where the whole group is moving forward towards the audience. And Christina Aguilera does this thing up front where she's very concave. And it's one of the movements. Sometimes I sort of file movement away in my brain when I see it for dance or for anything else. And it's one of the movements I think about that shape sometimes. Sometimes if I'm looking for ideas, if I'm dancing or choreographing something, I'll think, ooh, concave, Christina Aguilera. So some really good ideas in that number. And that brings me to my number one on this list, Show Me How You Burlesque. What a fun end number. The that just really is like a love letter to the space that they're in. It's a song where they're using a lot of people. I love how the energy builds. The energy builds partly because more and more people are getting on stage. At some points, they're just solo dancers here or there that are popping up in different areas of the room, and it shows you all the different features of this room. I love the fact, although it's not really emphasized in this number, I love the fact that there are those turning mirrors behind the bar. But in this particular number, people are sort of everywhere until they all come on the stage together. And it just shows you how many options they have in this room. They use the space, and then they get everybody on the stage, and it's just this beautiful building of energy that happens. Choreographers who did this movie, my hat is off to you. I really enjoy watching it for that reason, if for no other reason, although there are many other reasons, and I've given 10. Um, so that's my list of 10 things that I love about this film. I had a lot more because I didn't know what the burlesque performers were going to say when I talked to them. And so I'm here to say I could go on, but I'm not going to, because I would like to now share with you the conversations that I've had with Iridessence, with Jessabelle Thunder, and with Pearls Daily, and just give them a chance to share things that they either love about this film or that strike them about this film. Something that I love is that each of them approached the conversation in a different way. They had different lenses that they were looking through, whether it be historical or what it's really like to do burlesque, or things that that inspired them about the film. So you'll see three really different feeling conversations, which is so cool. And I hope that whether you are from the burlesque community and you found your way to this video, or whether you know nothing about it, I hope that you're taking something away from this, and that it makes you interested in this movie, or maybe even this whole art form. So without further ado, I'd like to bring in my guests. Okay, I'm very excited to be joined by Jezebelly, who is a burlesque performer in real life, and we're going to talk about Jezebelly's takes on the movie Burlesque. And first of all, I'm interested to know a little bit about your background. Tell us a bit about yourself and, why this is the perfect movie for you to talk about.
Well, thank you so much for having me, first off. And wow, I guess, yeah, so I started burlesque technically in 2015. I've been interested in the aesthetics and the idea of it for a long time, but it's really hard to know exactly what it is until you just go to shows. And you can, even now, like I'm still learning new things that I see like on the stage. And so burlesque is ever evolving. So it's hard to say exactly what it is, but ultimately it's the art of the striptease. And yeah, I started about 10-ish years ago, coming up on my 10 years this spring. And I've personally always been deeply invested in like the black body within burlesque and expressing femininity on my body, which is not a standard, it doesn't meet a number of beauty standards within the larger world or even within the context of burlesque, but kind of using that art form to reclaim it for myself.
What a beautiful objective you have, and it sounds like it's evolved for you over time.
Absolutely. Yeah. It
Mm.
started very much as like, I like the aesthetics of this thing. And then it also started as like that was my idea of burlesque before I started doing it. And then when I started doing it, it was to reclaim a space for my body within it. And now it's definitely moved toward an appreciation for the history of like Black entertainment within burlesque, especially. So it's all of those at the same time for me.
Yeah, and it can be so many things. Well,
Absolutely.
we're going to talk a little bit about the movie Burlesque. So, of course, for everybody watching this, you've heard the list of things that I love about the movie Burlesque, but I'm interested to know your takes on it and what really jumps out for you. And it can be small things, it can be big themes, whatever comes to mind. But what would be the first thing that really jumps out at you when you think about this film?
I think it's certainly fun. It's a fantasy. It's the whole small town girl goes to the big city and really wants to make it, and then eventually does based on her talent. And you kind of hope that that is your story for whatever parts you can relate to. So I definitely enjoy the fantasy of it all, and of course the aesthetics. Does it represent exactly how burlesque works in reality? Not really, but it's still a lot of fun. And there has been somewhat of a conversation. There's a lot of burlesque performers that were operating at the time this movie was released and who are operating now, that have been inspired by the film and thus kind of like, you know, regurgitated it, for lack of a better word, kind of in their own artistry. And so that's always fun to see. We make lots of memes about it in the community, so it's entertaining and it's very tongue in cheek. Um, and I think that a lot of burlesque performers do like the movie. Like few of us are like, oh, I hate that movie and how it represents us, because we know it's not like that realistic, but it's still a lot of fun for us. So yeah.
It's tricky when, because, so many rom-coms. I mean, I don't know if this is all the way a traditional rom-com, but it
Right.
is romantic and it does have comedy and it has all of the things. But I think it's really well described by you as a fantasy. And I think a lot of rom-coms are a fantasy. And I think in most cases, you kind of need to go into that genre of movie ready to take it with like a light heart and
Yeah, you take it with a grain
um
of salt for sure.
but it's tricky when it's introducing you to a subject matter or raising awareness for a community that doesn't always get awareness, because then it feels
Yeah.
like it needs to be more serious. So I can appreciate that conversation would be happening.
Yeah, and it's one of the few mainstream depictions of our artistry that there is. And I would say it's ultimately a lot of drag, but there is burlesque and the theme of burlesque with like throughout the movie. And also drag and burlesque have had a very long historical handshake as well. So I'm not upset that it was more drag in a lot of ways. but also the with the nature of burlesque, it's hard to have a real mainstream depiction of what we do because it is very closely aligned with sex work, and some people would consider it sex work. So like it really is hard to depict on a mainstream level without censorship being an issue, basically. So it's like we
Mm.
take what we can get.
Yeah, so they took some creative license to make it
Absolutely.
not be censored, it sounds like, and to get the rating that they were looking for. Yeah, so okay, so it sounds like it had sort of a formative it almost seems like it became a meta thing. Like, whatever the burlesque community was before this movie came out, once it came out and people started referencing back to it, it starts to change the conversation even within the community.
Yes, absolutely.
Hmm. That's so interesting. So, I mean, these are things that I would not have known if not for talking to you. So I love hearing about this. What else jumps out at you with this film?
The thing that I always think about, which they kind of snuck burlesque in the burlesque movie, and that is the scene with Alan Cumming and these two like acro dancers. They do this act, and there's like a moment with a banana, and they have this very like Weimar Republic kind of vaudevillian makeup, and it's very reminiscent of Cabaret, and they're doing this like threesome act that I feel like is very much a snippet of like what burlesque can look like. Um, and that was one of my favorite scenes because it's kind of like a background moment. It's like this moment that opens a scene, but they're not the stars of the scene. It's just like, oh, this is what's happening in the club before you get to Christina and Cam doing whatever they're doing at the bar. But I love watching that the movement that they do and their like communication and play with each other and that scene of those performers and Alan Cumming. I believe that's Alan Cumming who's in that scene. Um, I just love him, and I feel like he was such a good cast. Like that, whoever cast him for that vibe, like great job on that front. And so I love that moment because if I were to take something out of the movie that felt like the most like what you might see on a burlesque stage and like real life in terms of what we are able to do with production value and like the stages we have access to, that's the most likely thing that you would see. Everything else is like either it's not quite burlesque or it has aspects of burlesque, but like, yeah, right, getting a whole band to like have perfect choreography with your act, like that sort of thing. So I love that little scene with those dancers. And one of the other things I really love too about the movie is there's, the scene where after she learns about the club and she sees it and she's lit up, which is like, I think what so many of us have felt when we discover burlesque. It lights up your brain and it's just like, I don't know what this is, but I gotta find out and I want to do it. And she goes and she does research and she like has this spread of these books, and I want to say Gypsy Rose Lee is in one of them, and like she actually does her research. And so I love that moment of like they do, wink at the actual history of burlesque, which is important to discover and do your research when kind of finding your own place within the art form.
Is that a process that a lot of performers go through of actually researching it, or do people tend to do like classes instead of that?
It's
And
certainly a mix. It's a very like burlesque, and one's journey within it is very unique. Even my journey is very unique. I didn't come up through any classes. And so research was kind of the way, research and going to see shows, like research of the history, research of the actual art form, because research is just like, a practice, but what you're researching really depends. And so doing the actual research of the history is its own thing that I hope a lot more people are doing. There's a lot of there can sometimes be a bit of territorial behavior of like who created a costume or who did this kind of thing on stage, or even like I did that song first, but like few of us own the rights to the music that we're dancing to. And chances are, in the history of like actual classic burlesque before the 90s, people, even just within entertainment, like everything's been done. So there's a limit to what you can claim as like, your own. And so to do the research and to find out like how you make it your own without just straight up stealing it from others, but also understanding that like it's hard to own a lot within this art form. So that's one of the things that I hope people learn kind of through doing that research. But ultimately, a lot of people do take classes as well. Um, and it kind of just depends on your own individual interest in the actual history of it, because there's plenty of performers who don't do any of that and they're still making it. So
Well, this is so cool. So it sounds like, especially in the beginning where we see Allie getting sparked by it, taking an interest, and then those first steps she takes to figure out what it's all about, that
yeah,
resonates with what you really experienced.
yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah.
definitely like a an aha moment, like, oh, I gotta find out everything I can about this. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's so good. And just to go back to something you were saying earlier, I just wanted to stop down on like it is kind of amazing that Alan Cumming can be a background character.
Yeah.
And that, like it's
Like
like
he's cast as
what's
this and he's so
happening?
electric. He has
Yeah,
so much presence and he's just kind of like really his screen time is very limited, but like everything he does is just like on the mark and very much like the fantasy and I mean, I don't want to say he wasn't realistic, but there were also aspects of like things that he did right, like that he was performing for Allie in a way where like really when we're backstage and we're off, we're not really performing for each other. It's just kind of like, hey, can I borrow some pasty tape? Great. Like, and I feel like he's kind of part of the fantasy for her too. But also, I think it's before she gets into it that he is. So she's like part of the audience for him.
yeah. Okay, I'm loving all the mix of different things that are coming up for you. What else do you have on your list?
Of course, the Mae West references that appear. There's an act that Allie does where it's not, but it's a man what takes his time, which is a Mae West song. And actually, the first time I heard that song was through this movie. And then there's the aesthetics of like, this 1920s, 30s feel. She's got the wig and the pearls and she's playing around and she even kind of puts on this like Mae West like timbre to her voice um, at different times. And then I want to say she might even say the line "Come up and see me sometime" or some other line that's an actual Mae West line. And then I think it was after that I learned that it was actually a Mae West song. And I was like, oh, wait, I heard that. So that was a cover that they did. And so for me, I'm positive I've seen Mae West references, but I just didn't know that song was hers at the time. So it actually kind of introduced me to some of my own burlesque and entertainment history that way.
That's interesting. And actually, as somebody not in the community, if you had asked me before having this conversation, like what do I think is the most burlesque of of the numbers that we see, I probably would have pointed to that one.
Hmm.
If I were just guessing. And I don't know if that even still feels completely faithful to it, but in some of the other numbers, I can tell it's more about like a being a dance number maybe than
Yeah, so I would say that definitely did feel like that was the other act I was thinking that felt more like like a burlesque performance, but maybe from another time, or even the kind of a performance referencing the handshake between burlesque and cinema, because there aren't a lot of actual burlesque performances we have filmed compared to like actual Hollywood films. But also, it was the same thing back in the day where they were kind of trying to depict burlesque in these very Hays Code appropriate ways on film as well. So I feel like there's some references to that, or even pre-Hays Code, I guess, with someone like Mae West, because she was very raunchy. But I do think, yeah, there's a lot of that aesthetic reference within that act, but also, I guess I'm thinking about like to what an actual burlesque act could look like today, and that one is more like an old Hollywood does burlesque because of the production value and the timing, which makes that act like there's these moments where she's like playing around in the space and walking through these mirrors, and then she appears behind this thing, and her clothing pops off, but she's still censored. All of these things which feel like perfectly timed, and trying to recreate that on an actual stage is very difficult without like having access to the exact stage you're going to do it on and all of this production value basically. So I think it does reference burlesque in a lot of ways, but it might not be something you can actually recreate on a stage at an actual burlesque show easily.
Yeah. Ooh, so interesting. And as you're saying that, it makes me think because I didn't really clock this before, but there are quite a few times in this movie where they play with like placement,
Mm-hmm.
like the box of cookies.
Mm-hmm.
A moment in a montage where Jack is taking a picture of Allie blowing out a
Yeah.
cake, but it looks at first it looks like she's wearing the outfit.
Yeah.
That must have taken some time to like line up that shot to make it look
Exactly.
exactly right. But they do play with that a bunch of times, and they also do it in that number quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's like a lot of that peppered throughout the film, and it's not even always in the burlesque acts.
Yeah.
And I think that another side of burlesque that a number of us sometimes have a hard time differentiating is like there's burlesque, and then there's being a showgirl, and then there's like cabaret entertainment and like chorus dancing. So like there were a number of chorus girls back in the day and like chorus lines. And I feel like that is also heavily referenced with the group acts that they're doing, that you don't often see as much within burlesque, just because like the amount of money you have to like finance a chorus group or a number of like showgirls, like those are very large scale like financed operations, and a lot of actual burlesque is very much on the fringe financially. So there's an umbrella of like all of these different kinds of entertainment that sometimes get called burlesque too, but the film really references almost all of it.
So good. We're getting an education here if you're not from this community. It's so good. Do you have anything else on your list?
um One of the things that just always cracks me up, it's not so much like a I think they did this was great, but more so like I see this in the movie and I'm like is the aspect of like the house costume designer Stanley Tucci being like, oh, here, I'll pick out some things and like, here, you can wear this. Kind of exactly like his, I don't, it's a very Stanley Tucci role, and it's entertaining, but like the reality is that no one is making things for you. Like I've had so many emails back when I used to be a part of a troupe, like people would say, sign me up, I want to do this. And like, do you provide costumes or where? And I'm like, nope, that's you've got to do it all yourself. Like an actual practice within the burlesque community, no one's making your costume for you unless you're paying them to do it. Um, or unless they really deeply believe that you are like somebody they want to spend this time and effort on to like put in a group act. But yeah, usually no one's giving you the costume and no one's choreographing the act for you and teaching it to you. Like it's truly you are your own boss in every aspect. And so that's just one of the things in the movie that kind of cracks me up. And it's like, oh, if only you could show up and join the chorus and, you know, strong arm your way into an audition. And then they also give you the costume that you can fit and it looks good. And they don't talk about how it probably smells because 17 girls sweated in it before you. Like, it's just that
This
kind
is
of
just hers. Yeah, Stanley Tucci just stepped off the set of Devil Wears Prada and straight into
exactly.
the.
Yes, it was very much just like okay. And then he went to work at, this place with Cher. So
Oh
that's
my
just one of the
goodness.
things that cracks me up about the movie. But, I hearken it very much to like, it's the fantasy. Um, and I'm not going to knock the fantasy as long as people know that it's a fantasy.
Yeah, and I think, that's where I think if you look at this as more of a dance company, it might make sense in the sense
Yeah.
of like
Yeah. It's a lot
they
more.
are choreographing big numbers with a bunch of
Yeah.
dancers, and so somebody does need to they need to take central control over
It's
that
very much,
process.
yeah, it's much more like a
Um,
dance company.
but yeah, like if actual burlesque is more individual performances structured by the individual, and maybe you get a bunch of people on the day and you put them into one entertainment performance, but it isn't the house's control. Yeah, it's a really interesting distinction, and I think it helps me sort of separate like what is the community and what's something else.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
so cool. All right. I love all these details. Different things are coming up in all of these conversations I'm having. And I nobody mentioned this. So this is such a good point. So good. Stanley Tucci
Thank
needs
you.
some love.
Love Gigi.
What a fun cast choice for this. So okay, so we've got a great list going here. Anything else?
That was about I mean, I'm sure things will come up, but these were like the things that I always think about
Yeah.
when I think about the movie. So,
Well, I love that you clearly take a very historical focus in how you think. I can see that you've evolved into this space where that's how you look at the art form. And it's fun to hear that perspective
mhm.
and get a little bit of that knowledge the easy way without having to go to the library and get all the books. We're getting the download from you. Yeah, this is so good. So for those who want to follow you, for those who want to
Mhm.
see where you're performing or who want to know a little bit more about burlesque in your area, what can you direct them to?
My main point of contact for all of that would be my Instagram under Iridessence. I have two Instagrams. I have one under Jezebelly Presents and Iridessence. Both will have my link tree that kind of has my calendar of dates. And I do tend to share about like things that I'm doing on those platforms as well. And I'm coming
So
up with
good.
the website soon. Well, we'll see how it goes.
Stay
Just
tuned. We have to keep following to watch for the website. That's the
yeah.
plan. So good. Well, thank you so much for taking time and sharing things that you enjoy about this film or things that strike you about this film and giving us all some new things to look at when we watch it. Okay, everybody, you've heard my list of things I love about the movie Burlesque, and we need to hear from more people, is what we need to do. So I am here with Jessabelle Thunder, who is a burlesque performer, to share her favorite things about this movie. But first, tell us a little bit about yourself, Jess.
Yeah, I am Jessabelle Thunder, as you mentioned. I've been doing burlesque for 16 years this October. So at the end of this year, it'll be 16 years. And I've been doing it all over the world. I'm in LA. I'm in Los Angeles, let's just say that. But I started off doing it mostly just locally in LA, a few shows here and there. And then it kind of just started to snowball. And I started to do more performances in different states. And then it went to different countries. And, I was fortunate enough to go to Japan and Australia last year for the first time ever and do burlesque on a little tour with my best friend, Tito Bonito. And it was just magical. I didn't know it could take me as far as it has taken.
So I'm curious, this is just for my own knowledge. Are there certain places that are most known or most active for burlesque?
Yeah, I think most known, maybe, and most active, I guess, which is why they would be most known, right? Because they're the most active. But I feel like in the States, a lot of the times it's New York and Chicago quite a
Mm.
bit, are really well known and like on the map for having like multiple shows and a big community, and people can travel there and do back-to-back shows every other night of the week, if not every night. Um, I think when you think outside of America, I feel like Europe is just they embrace it way more than we do here in the States. So it's much more appreciated, I think. I'd like to think, not like to think, but I think I wish it was more appreciated here in the States. But I think in Europe, it's just seen as more of an art form, and more people are frequent cabaret and burlesque shows, variety shows often. So I always say, like, if I stop anyone on the street corner in Europe or even the UK, I'm like, have you been to a burlesque show? More times than not, they're gonna be like, yeah, I've been to one at least. But here in the States, it's usually like, what is that? Is the answer, at least here in LA, for sure. That's a lot of the answer I get a lot of times.
Well, hopefully, somewhere along the way with this series, people who aren't as familiar with it might stumble onto this video and learn more about it. And I think that's why it's especially important to hear from you on what you think is good about this film, because it's probably going to be different things than the things that I've brought up. So I asked you to like think about your top, favorite things about the movie Burlesque, and I'm curious what comes to mind for you. So let's start with your list and see where we go.
I think the first, okay, I'm gonna preface this because I feel like my friends, people I know, are gonna watch it and they're gonna be like, Jessabelle, you don't like that movie, really. Opposite by saying I don't hate it. It's just not my favorite film. It's not one I watch frequently. I've seen it a few times, honestly. I saw it when it came out, like initially in theaters. And I liked it for being what it is, like the genre, right? Like a comedy. I don't know what the other words are to describe it, but just like the film was fun. It was a fun film, but it's not my favorite because I went into it just being like, let me see if it's an accurate depiction of what we do. And it wasn't, but it didn't, I feel like it didn't also say that it was, but a lot of people took it as like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what burlesque is. It's just like this film. And I really wish it was like the film, but it's not. And I can't, I will also say there are places where it is very much like that, right? Like in Europe, I'm sure they have like really big burlesque venues that people go and they sip cocktails, they come in and out, that kind of thing, but it's not super common.
Okay.
Yeah, but so that's, I'm prefacing it with that. But I do have favorite elements of the film.
No,
As a
this is great.
Yeah,
This is
yeah,
great. And for anybody who's like hurt that this is not your favorite, it's fine. I am used to doing deep dives where I say the good and the bad. And so here, we're saying favorite things about the film, but I think for probably a lot of us, including me, we might be learning a lot about burlesque at the same time. So it's probably good to get some facts
for sure. No,
mixed in with.
yeah, no, I'm grateful that people went into it and some people came out of it being like, I need to see what this actually looks like and I need to figure it out in my city. So that is a positive element. Some people
Hmm.
out of that movie being like, I'm going to do exactly this. And they get into it and they're like, wait a second, it's nothing like the movie.
Hmm.
Not nothing,
Okay.
not as similar. Anyway, all that to say, I do have favorite elements of the movie.
Ooh, okay. Well, do tell. What are some of the things on your list?
I think the first thing that came to mind, and it speaks to me as a performer, especially, is the dancing. Like, obsessed with the dance element. Like, I just like, I love Christina Aguilera, but I was watching the dance choreo far more in the movie and like wishing I could have done that. Like, so when I have watched it multiple times, I've just been like studying the moves in the back, just being like, how do they, what is the choreography and how do I figure that out? Because I'm someone who, I'm not a trained dancer, but I love to dance. And so I used to like tell people, and not used to, but I still tell people, I feel like learned how to dance by watching music videos when I was younger and recording it, right? Because I'm older, recording it and then pausing it and rewinding it and fast forwarding it until I had all the choreography memorized. And so that movie really like brought that up for me. Watching it, I was just like in awe of all the tricks and things they were doing. And like, I wish that was me.
It's amazing. I've done dance as well. I haven't uh there I think it dips into styles that I'm not as familiar with. I think there's like more of a jazz element that you'll see in there and
Yeah,
but the choreography is tremendous.
yeah,
I'm so glad that it struck you from that standpoint too.
yeah, initially for sure. It also like brought back these memories of going to my gosh, whatever. I'm gonna date myself, but I just turned 40 like in December. So some people who watch this are gonna be like, I don't know what she's talking about because that was a long time ago. But there was a club, Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas called the Pussycat Dolls Club or Lounge, like when they were starting out to be a burlesque kind of troupe, I guess. And so that film, I think some of the people in the film were probably part of that club at some point. if I remember correctly. But anyway, it was like a throwback to that, and also 40 Deuce, which is like a one of the first burlesque shows I ever saw. So that's why it also like struck me initially, because I was just like, oh, this is so cool. It's just like 40 Deuce and the Pussycat Dolls in Las Vegas. And yeah.
So it brought in the nostalgia element for you also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that part.
So good. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of sort of different types of choreography in it as well. I think if you watch the people in the background, that's where it gets really interesting, like you said, because they're really filling things out. And it always amazes me when people do group choreography. It must take forever to choreograph movement for every single person in a group.
Make sure everyone is right. I mean, that's what is great about a professional dancer. They can just hit it and know it every single time, hit their marks. And so you have a group of people like that, it just works easily, I'm sure. But I can't imagine like being in a group. I've done group acts before, not often, because I just terrified that I'm not going to hit the marks that everyone else is hitting. I'm looking at them and not looking straight, because I'm just like, am I doing this movement at the same time as them? But that's got to be like, yeah, that's amazing when they can just see this whole vision all together and everyone's hitting all the right moments at the right time. Like that makes me so happy to watch and see.
Oh, it's so good. Okay, so the dance choreography is one of the things on your list. What else do you have on your list?
The second thing also speaks to me as a performer. The music, the songs, like I definitely was like, all right, this is pretty good. Pretty much all of them are pretty fun. I'm trying to think of like the stand. I mean, Christina Aguilera in that green outfit, the green gown, and like oh, that moment with the lighting and the filter. Kidding, it was so perfect. That was actually really good. But I love that's a good song.
It's
She
so
did
funny too, because it's like the simplest number by
it. Yeah.
far, and somehow it seems like bigger than the big number. Like, I don't know, the way they paced it, the way they ordered them, something about that number being in that place makes it seem huge, but
Yeah.
it's the least complicated thing.
Yeah. Yeah. She also has this, big voice for such a small, I've seemingly small person. So she just fills the space just with her voice alone. But yeah, the music was a lot of fun, especially that whole like, burlesque when they're spelling it. And the beats of the drums, like, bah, 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 like I love all that together, syncing with the dance and then the beats. Ah, so good. But I love, yeah. So when I choose my burlesque acts, I always go with music first. And then the dancing and the costuming comes after that. So music is like often a number one thing I pick up on. And so that movie had obviously was full of music and really great ones.
Do do burlesque performers ever like use the songs from this movie, or is that way too on the nose? Because I'll tell you, I was a gymnast for a long time, and after my gymnastics days were done, I went back to see a couple meets, and people were using some of the songs from this movie.
Oh,
But they have to strip the words out, but they'd have um, so this was like kind of popular, a little bit popular in the gymnastics world, but is this music used?
I would love to see that in the gymnastics world.
You know, dance isn't really something most gymnasts have a mastery of, to be honest. So it's like kind of interesting to see the interpretation. It's
Yeah.
like kind of radical. But it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's good
I feel like,
music.
yeah, it's really good music. Yeah. I feel like I haven't seen too many people use it. And if so, like honestly, I feel like if someone did use it, I feel like a lot of us would roll our eyes
Hmm.
slightly and just hope that they are actually doing it really well so that it doesn't become this cheesy, gimmicky thing. I mean,
Hmm.
but also you could do it cheesy and gimmick and be comedy about it, right? That's also another element of burlesque is like the comedy aspect of it. So someone could take the music from it, and know that it's too on the nose and make it fun still. But then some people might take it and make it like super serious, and then you're like, I mean, it's not that serious. Like that, but okay. But I mean, I recently danced to a live-ish version of I mean, it's not an original song from the movie, but I Am a Good Girl, the one that she is that the one with the pearls of the fans? I think I can't remember.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I danced to that at a gig recently, they played the track, and then they had a pianist playing like live piano, and then someone singing the lyrics over the instrumental, and it was fun. But I was just like, do I have to dance to this song? But it was still a fun song to, and I had feather fans, so I went around the room and just like, it was pretty easy to like
Hmm.
make fun, not make fun of, but just make it fun and silly and playful. So it worked. But
Okay.
typically
That
I
that song kind of asks for that anyway, I think.
yeah, like just playful. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I haven't seen too many people actually dance to anything else from that movie, actually,
A
honestly.
lot of it does kind of ask for like a group. Or maybe I just have that in my head because that's how I've seen it.
Yeah.
Maybe you could do it as a solo act or in a smaller group, but
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm too,
so good. Actually, the thing about that number that always sticks out to me, I'm like, don't pour the champagne all over the piano. Like, don't do it. Pianos are expensive. I don't know. Like, that's not what you're supposed to focus on. But it always like for 1 second, I'm like, oh, the champagne, and then I'm with it again.
that actually reminds me of just watching burlesque nowadays, now that I've been doing it for so long. I mean, when I first started watching shows, people did I don't know how much you've seen, but outside the movie, like live burlesque shows, but a lot of people do glitter in their gloves. So they'll take off a glove and glitter will just rain down all over them in the stage. And people do champagne pours, and people do like heavy knee slams where they just drop down on their knees, and all these like huge moments. And now, after having done this for so long, I watch it with just like that kind of like, oh, like someone with a glitter glove, and I'm just like, oh no, the next person's gonna really, that's not gonna work for them. Like amazed like the audience, and just like, oh, the cleanup process.
Yeah.
I have been lingering it for as long, I guess.
Oh wow. Well, okay, so that's number two.
Yeah.
Um, what comes up for you for number three on your list?
Three, I feel like, is Stanley Tucci. Like he made that movie. I think he made like just the sentence. He made that movie. Like the dance and the music was really fun, and Christina was cute, and she sang beautifully, and Cher sang beautifully. But I feel like he just like brought it all, just a minor role, but just brought it all together and made it, I don't know, make sense, I guess. Just he was the driving force, oddly enough, for me in watching that. I guess, it was about her, but I just felt like he brought things together. I don't know like why I felt that way, but
Well, but now that you say that, because it hadn't really clicked for me, but he is sort of the character that ties every other character together. I mean, in theory, Tess should be that, but not really, because like you also need to get like he's having heart to hearts with Jack.
Mhm.
He's kind of communicating with everybody, and
Yeah.
he's also just a really good actor, right? So it's
Yeah.
just fun to see all the ways that he's kind of the glue.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And he played it so well. Just it's simple. It was like just short little brief moments, and he would say a thing and you're just like, "Oh, yeah. Yeah." Like he had the powerful sentences in the film. Like,
He has such a good rapport and such a good chemistry with everybody because it's a cast that like everybody is a specialist in a different area, but they all have to be like a Jill or Jack of all trades in
mm,
the film, and not everybody can be that. Like for some of them, it might have been their first time acting, and he was able to, or like new to acting, and he was sort of able to bind it all together. Like I feel like if I were an actor on that set, I might have been comfortable
mm,
knowing that I'd be taken care of in a scene with him.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's also just
yeah,
like Stanley Tucci's in this movie. Come on.
yeah.
That's okay. Cool.
It's amazing the people they got to say yes on this. It's wild. It's so good.
It really it really is. Oh my gosh. Yes. Yes, yes. Definitely.
Hmm. So Stanley Tucci. All right, we've got the dancing, we've got the music, we've got Stanley Tucci. What do we
Two.
have for number four?
Number four is just general. Number four and five are pretty just general.
Okay.
I, but number four, I think, is that it was like a love letter to Los Angeles. And I
Hmm.
love movies that showcase Los Angeles. Like seeing sometimes it takes you out of a film, but sometimes it puts you in it more. being able to say like, oh, I know that street. Oh, I know that bar that they're filming that in. Oh my God, I know that like, that neighborhood and that she's living, we know the neighborhoods, the cross streets or things like that. The heavy rain pour in the scene was like a bit much. I'm like, that's not really LA as much, but whatever. But just every little element, and just I think the outside, the first time I saw the film, the outside steps that lead up in the archway that says the
Burlesque Lounge.
Burlesque Lounge. Yeah, yeah. I was like, oh, I know that staircase. Like I've been to that place. But when they go inside, it's obviously not the same location. But it's Bardot, which is a club above the Avalon, and you go from the staircase upstairs, and it's a really cute lounge, but it's not. It's an actual lounge, but it's not huge. But it has the same kind of burlesque cabaret 20s 30s aesthetic kind of thing. I don't even know if it's still there, but yeah, it was kind of cool to be like, oh, I know that spot. Oh, I know that spot. I love watching movies like that, so I love that they made that the setting of it all.
So given that you live in LA, did it sort of, I know that there's, movie magic in terms of like exteriors and interiors, sets and all of that, but did it basically check out for you in terms of like putting you in the right places?
I think so. I mean, I really did wish that Burlesque Lounge was an actual place somewhere here. Like the rotating, I mean, it had elements from different places in LA, I think. So, right, the rotating mirrors and things like that is very much like Harvell's in Long Beach. It has a not a mirror, but it has like this velvet wall and three doors that go from backstage to the stage, and they turn around, and it's pretty cool. But I loved watching those scenes and that in the stage, and everything was just like, oh God, I wish that was an actual place that we performed at. The backstage being extra crowded, that was accurate. The vanity mirrors, not as much accuracy. But yeah, I feel like yeah, it just really put me. I'm trying to think of other places. I am someone who Googles sets and locations that I'm curious about. And so I did, after the film, Google like, where actually was that filmed? And the stage one was filmed at the Montalban Theater somewhere, which I have not been in that spot, but I'm curious to go see what it actually looks like on the inside.
It's an impressive, especially by the time you get to the final number, the Show Me How You Burlesque number, and they are using the whole space and all the different features of it. And it occurs to you like, wow, there was a lot going on in this space that I didn't even realize. Like all the different places the dancers are popping up in, that's like a flat level surface, and other people are still dining around them or having drinks around them. It was very impressive.
What a dream. I wish that was real. I really do.
Yeah.
I wish someone would have seen that film, much like the character that had all the money in the film. I wish there would have been a real person to see that film in the theater and been like, I'm gonna create that in Los Angeles, actually. No one
Yeah.
no one did.
Still time. There's still time, right? There could be a super fan out there.
Yeah, maybe after this conversation.
Let's see what we can do, folks. Let's get on this.
Yeah.
And you can be a consultant and
Yes.
just say like, here's what we need.
Yes.
Like,
Oh my gosh, that's so important.
mm-hmm.
It shows that we do around the world and around LA, whatever, anywhere we do shows where you're just like, I wish they would have talked to someone who performs about this before they built this, because this is not actually a performance space, or this is not working for the acts that they want to bring. Like people just go, oh yeah, we're gonna put that there and put this stage here, or not put a stage at all, and you're just like, no one can see me.
Mm-hmm.
If people are sitting here, that was probably a bad choice to put the stage all the way in the corner. Those people can't see, things like that. So
Yeah.
that's a tangent kind of, but I wish people would consult with the entertainment that they want to have in the venues to help them.
Yeah. Instead of trying to just make it, I mean, who knows what the primary consideration was, if it was something to do with the service or,
Yeah.
whatever else was happening. But yeah, it would be nice to make sure that like if people are coming to see entertainment, if that's the point of them being there, then
Mm,
make it possible. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. Then more people will be like, oh, this space was made for performances. I'm going to keep coming to this and tell people about it. It would just keep going, snowball.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got a beautiful list forming here, but I think you've still got like one more, maybe one more. What's
One more.
on that number one or the number five, depending on which way we're counting, up or down?
Yeah. I feel like I actually had a particular order. I was thinking about it. I think five for me is again just a general. I just like the cheesiness of the movie from my point. I love a cheesy, I can appreciate a cheesy, silly, playful movie that doesn't take itself too seriously. And I feel like I hope I'm saying that. Maybe they did. Who knows? But in my eyes, it didn't seem like they were taking it to like, oh my God, this is gonna get an Oscar kind of film. It was just like this is just a fun film that you could watch with your girlfriends and your other friends, and you can just laugh and chuckle about it. And I feel like that element, the storyline of this small town, everyone's done that, right? And now we don't see it as like, oh my God, it's so dramatic. It's just like, oh yeah, the typical storyline: a small town girl comes to a big city. She makes it big. Of course, she got up there and sang her heart out, and people were shocked. But we all knew she could sing. It's just like it was so predictable, but just cheesy and fun at the same time. And so I can appreciate it from that viewpoint.
It has rewatch power for that reason. Even the first watch is like a rewatch. It's just like comfortable. It's like putting
Yeah,
on some slippers. Like you're ready to watch the film. But
yeah.
yeah, I mean, we've seen the plot before. I mean, there are films on my rom-com month list that are I'm saying they're rom-coms, but there's drama for sure. Some of them have an edge and they're a little darker, and this is not one of them.
No,
This is-
not at all. I love the villain and being like, oh, psych, actually, I'm going to tear it down. Like, that's so 80s movie line, I think. Like,
Mhm.
I think that element of it makes me like, all right, it's okay. It's okay of a movie. Like, if you don't go into if I feel like in a lot of the burlesque community when it was coming out, we were just like, oh, let's see if this is accurate depiction. We're gonna judge it. And I saw it the first time I saw it, I was like, oh, I'm not gonna see it from that lens. I'm just gonna see it as a fun, cute, silly movie. I wasn't like after I came out of it, I wasn't like, oh, you know what? I don't care if they misrepresented what we do for the most part. I just think it's a fun movie. And it did bring more people into the world of burlesque, like to perform. I don't know how many people saw it, the movie, and then went to a show. Who knows? But it
From
brought
what
more.
you saw, the people who like came to the community because they had seen the movie, did a lot of them stay?
That's a good question. I don't know. I can't pinpoint who those people were, but I have been in when I've taught classes. I sometimes sit in a circle with people and I have them introduce themselves and say how long they've been performing, what their inspiration was. And I will get quite a few people being like, I saw the film and then I wanted to try it. Who stays? I have no idea. I can't think of anything right off the top of my head of anyone particularly, but I have heard a lot of people in those like circle moments at like classes say that they wanted to try it because watching the movie.
Well, I mean, the grassroots involvement has to start somewhere, right? So it's great that at least it begins there. But
Yeah.
yeah, what a cool list. Just a little bit of everything. Got some specifics, got some things that are more general.
Mm.
Um, So I know that this, in terms of accuracy, that's not what this movie was trying to do. But is there anything that you would direct people towards if they wanted a more accurate look?
Oh gosh. Scripted movie wise, I can't think of anything that has a script. Maybe like OG Gypsy,
Hmm.
right? Like with Natalie Wood. That's like a classic. It's fun. It's just a fun film, but she becomes the burlesque performer at the end. Or is a burlesque performer. I think you know what? Miss Maisel. Did you ever watch that show?
That
The
where she's a stand-up comic?
Mhm.
Interesting.
Yeah, I knew so many people in the later seasons when she went to do the stand-up host at the burlesque review. I
Hmm.
was, oh yeah. I mean, we don't do most shows don't do huge props like in that season, and but that was like from the 50s, right? When there was like a heyday of people going to stuff like that. So that was pretty accurate of that time. But I think it's pretty accurate to see all the people fumbling backstage trying to get dressed. People are yelling, people are smoking, like have their legs up, people are sleeping like that. That's pretty accurate. I can't remember which seasons exactly that was of Miss Maisel, but yeah, there were a couple seasons towards the end of it where she was doing the burlesque club. I feel like that's a good thing to watch, fun thing to watch. I also think there's a lot of documentaries out there, actually. I won't say lie, I say handful. I'll say a handful of burlesque documentaries out there that I've seen. I know the first one I watched was called All That Glitters, I believe, and it was about the Seattle burlesque scene, people from Seattle.
Oh,
Yeah, so that I think that's what it was called, All That Glitters. I can't remember where I saw it, which streaming service, but there was one. There's also one called Getting Naked or The Art of Getting Naked, which I think features people in New York. And so I don't think I've watched that one yet. There might be two of a similar name. I can't recall. I've seen two burlesque documentaries that had people I knew in it that were really good. And I know there was one that came out recently, a couple years ago, about getting naked, and it was about New York. Anyway, there's documentaries about it, and I highly recommend people watch documentaries
and then
about
if
it.
people are in LA and they want to get acclimated, any suggestions?
I mean, so shows to see,
Sure,
right?
plug
Like,
anything you want.
oh, plug anything I want. Follow me on Instagram, and I'll post my account. I'm just kidding. I mean, I'm not half. I'm half kidding.
Half
Uh,
kidding. This is why I gave you space to do this very thing. Because I mean, if people are interested, if they're watching this and they want to know like how do I learn more, maybe do it or go see a show.
yeah,
Yeah.
people often ask on my social media when I post something. There's like, I want to do this. How do I get into it? And I always say, um, find classes. That's how I started. Not everyone in LA does like a series of classes like they used to back in the day, but people like my friend Ginger Valentine teaches workshops often, one-off ones every few months or every month, and she has an online subscription service and things like that. A lot of performers teach one-off classes here and there, like I do. I've started doing that more often, and then I tell people to go just watch shows in their city, go support the shows, and connect the performers there, and maybe get one-on-one classes from those people, or they know people who teach other things too they can connect with. But yeah, I feel like the two most important things are like take some classes and go to support the shows and performers, because if you don't, then they're not going to be around.
Hmm.
Learn from.
There won't be a community for you to join.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like LA has, gosh, we don't really have as many like proper stage cabaret shows like we used to. A lot of it's kind of like pop-up burlesque, or it's at a restaurant or a bar, kind of situation. But there's Muse Burlesque, which is a stage show in Santa Ana, Orange County, that's been around for a while. That one's a good one. We're having I don't know when this is coming out, but February 16th, we're doing an anniversary show with a live band. So sometimes they do live band burlesque, sometimes they do everyone shows up with their own acts and their own tracks kind of thing too. But that's like a proper stage burlesque show. I do a lot of venues that are bars and restaurants. I just want entertainment happening. So La Boheme in West Hollywood. I do Delilah on Sunday night, jazz night. It's like a pop up thing. Just one off. Some people want me to show up and do something. I'll do it for the most part. Drag shows. Sometimes I do drag shows. I do burlesque in drag shows. So yeah, just Google, Google and follow people on social media. That's how you learn.
It's a great place to start. Well, thank you so much for taking some time and sharing what you think about this film and the things that you enjoy about it. It's going to be fun to see like the total picture that we get from all of our different lists for this movie. And everybody, if you were interested in following Jess, I've got links in the description, and she gave you plenty more to check out if you're interested. So thank you so much for this,
Wait,
Jess.
do I get to hear yours?
Well, as soon as I do it, I'm waiting to hear everybody's first. But if you're watching this, this is a confusing thing for me to say because I probably said mine first and then, but I have a feeling I'm going to repeat a lot of favorite things that you all found favorite based on what you're saying here. But we'll see. I'll try to spice it up.
Okay, maybe like some one-liners from the film.
Mm-hmm. Yep, got a little bit of that going on. Yeah. This has been such a blast. Thank you for joining me. And, I hope this inspires some people to check out Burlesque.
I hope so too.
Okay, I am very pleased to say that I am here with the wonderful Pearls Daly, who is one of the burlesque performers that we're going to talk to about this movie. And first of all, before we get into the things that you love about the movie Burlesque, Pearls, can you share a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm a New York City-based burlesque performer. I've been in the industry about 15 years. I was recently crowned the Queen of the Striptease, actually in New Orleans, interestingly enough. I'm also a former Miss Coney Island, and yeah, I perform and produce full time, both in New York and all over the country. I've also performed internationally a few places, and I really love this community, and I really love all of the creativity involved. And I'm so excited to be chatting with you today about this very fun and funny film.
I have to say, on a more serious note, it sounds like an incredible accomplishment to be able to do what you do full time. Um, I bet
Thank
a lot of people wish they could and haven't gotten there yet. So that sounds amazing to me.
Thank you. It's definitely it takes time. You know, nothing happens overnight. I always think of this wonderful interview that Reese Witherspoon did years ago when I was in high school. I believe Legally Blonde had just come out, and in her interview, she goes, "Yeah, you know, it took 10 years to become an overnight sensation." And I think that's true for, a lot of art forms. You know, it takes time. You have to get to know people, also get to know what you like within the industry, because there's lots of different types of burlesque. You have to kind of find your thing. And, like all great recipes and careers, it takes a lot of different seasonings and different things before you kind of find your stride.
Mm. Yeah, I mean that is something that's interesting about really any art form is that there's so many things, people that you can look at who are doing maybe something like what you do, but you have to find your style within the context of that, and that probably takes time as well for
Oh, yeah.
you to decide that and for people to grab a hold of it. So, this is just so exciting. I'll give you an opportunity later to let people know where they can find you and what you have coming up, but first things first, we want to talk about the movie Burlesque from 2010. And I've already shared a list of things that I love about this film, but I want to hear what you love about this film or what really strikes you about this film, especially as somebody who knows this community inside and out. I'm wondering what's going to be different, like what hits you differently than it does me. So I wanted to like sort of give you some space here. I know you've been working on a list of things that you love about this film. So what's the first thing that you wanted to talk about?
Believe it or not, okay, yes, on my list, and I made a note to talk about this, but I'm actually going to start with why I actually do love and appreciate this film. And I think it's important to remember that, burlesque is a very subculture. We're kind of on the fringe of a lot of things. And I feel like um, for all of the, quirky things about this film, which we'll dive into in a moment, I think that it really put a great spotlight on burlesque. Like, I think of when I was in high school, before I even knew what burlesque was, there were certain films that came out like Chicago, Moulin Rouge, Coyote Ugly. These films that kind of highlighted nightlife culture and showgirls and burlesque. And I was obsessed with these films. I got the soundtracks, I would perform them at home, I would put together these things. And I didn't know what burlesque was, but the imagery, the inspiration, the history, a lot of burlesque showgirl culture are kind of tied up in those films. So when burlesque came out, I had a motherly instinct about it because for all of its pitfalls, I think that it inspired a lot of people that maybe would never know what burlesque was to literally be like, wow, I really like what they're doing in this film. And now the internet is huge, so people can go online, they can look up burlesque, and it will lead them to maybe a scene or in their local city or in their town, or maybe they'll create a show. And that's how burlesque has stayed alive. So that's actually, I think, the thing that I appreciate most about the film, because of course there's things that you go, what? that, I mean, that would never happen, or, I wish that would happen. But I think that, it was really great for burlesque in many ways, meaning it probably inspired a whole bunch of people to either be a fan, to start looking at it. And also, I have to tell you, to this day, I get bookings, and sometimes people request music from that film, or they want a look from that film, and that does nothing but help burlesque. Similar to, everybody wants a Moulin Rouge theme event, or, things that are really popular. I mean, it can't do anything but help us and kind of put us in the spotlight and give us like some mainstream moments, which I'm very passionate about burlesque having. We deserve to have those big moments on those big platforms. And I think this movie, in a wacky way, really did that for a lot of people. So I think that's the number one thing I love about this movie. And I know it's not a direct scene or a direct thing, but those movies from my high school years really you know, unconsciously shaped a lot of what I do now. So I think that this film did that for a lot of people as well.
That's so great to hear, and a perspective that I would not be able to have myself. So it's like it raised awareness for the culture, for the community, for the activity,
Yeah,
and is still, it sounds like, even though it's so 15 years. And actually, it's kind of interesting because you said you've been doing it for 15 years. So it was like really right at the start for you that this film
yeah,
came out.
yeah, actually. And yeah, people uh you clients would, they love the soundtrack. I mean, there's so many great things in this movie. Personally, I think all of the music is very fun and catchy. You have Cher, you have Christina Aguilera. I mean, you can't deny these two women are wildly talented. And I know that Christina was, I believe, the musical producer on the film, which, as that's always great to see a woman, kind of in charge and having a producer credit on a really big project. And they are so talented. It's like undeniable. You can't be like, oh, well, what a movie. It's like, God, I mean, Cher is a legend. And, Christina is too. They're so good. They're such amazing singers. And I feel like they really captured their characters. That is so burlesque. My earring just came off. These two women, these two women, like they really capture, the spirit of burlesque so well.
What? I don't
Yeah,
have anything to
no,
take off.
again, for this guy. But yeah, I so enjoyed their performances. I think they do an amazing job.
It is pretty incredible to think about what the workload must have been like for Christina Aguilera on this film in particular,
Oh yeah,
with every dance number, every song, all of the every scene. She's been pretty much every frame of this movie,
yeah, God.
just about, except for maybe some of the moments that are like Cher and Stanley Tucci. Um, but yeah, it's amazing what that workload must have looked like, and that the talent was able to shine through it, in spite of how much work they were putting into it. So, and because of it. Oh my goodness. Okay, so we've got the fact that it built this grassroots uh movement towards burlesque, the music. What else do you have on your list? What do you love about this film?
Oh my God. Okay, so first thing that comes to mind, I love a small town girl story coming to a big city and following their dream. I mean, in many ways, I feel that. I mean, I come from a very small town in upstate New York, coming to New York and kind of, hitting the ground running. And just a small thing that I just so appreciate is that Christina Aguilera gets off this Greyhound bus or whatever in downtown LA. And her first day, I respect this so much. She's like, I'm going to go out and audition. And her character, Allie, literally has a hard copy of Backstage, which I remember like hard copies of Backstage. I mean, early in my career, because I am an actor as well. I came to New York initially, for acting, and I remember those days. I remember like '07, 2006, 2007, going to the corner and being so excited and getting my hard copy of Backstage and going through all the auditions and going and signing up and doing that. And I actually have I actually have two backstages that I actually saved. One was like my first like big job out of town, and the second was my first like New York City job. I remember I like circled it and I, going to and I booked it. And I remember being like, oh my God, I love this. And I was like, I'll put it in my scrapbook. So I actually I actually have these old backstages. But that first little thing, and I think that's such a like a fun, funny on the nose touch because I think all new performers, especially in that time, did that. I mean, I did that. And when I saw that in the movie, I was like, oh,
Aw.
this tracks. She with her hard backstage. So that's the one little quirky thing, first thing
Well,
that
I
comes.
love that you brought that up because I didn't even know. So I was like, is this a newspaper with a like a classified section? That's very specific. I didn't really know what I was looking at. I mean, you get the point, obviously, but I assumed it was a newspaper with a classified section and like a subsection for the arts. And so it sounds like was the whole publication like listings, or was it also like a magazine? What was that publication?
Well, it's funny. I mean, backstage is still like coming in. I mean, I still have a backstage account. I just think they're more online. I believe they did have a magazine, but back in the day in the cities, I think each city had like their backstage. So,
Hmm.
like in New York, it had all the auditions. So that was like where you went to find your audition. So the whole paper was dedicated to entertainment, mainly acting that I remember. Um, I'm sure there were other things, but again, that was like my focus at the time was looking for theater work, musical theater work. So that was my main focus. And I remember that being the main meat of the hard copies of Backstage. But yeah, what? And I can't believe that's like there's so many people who don't know who never had that. I'm like, wow, that's like vintage now. Like Burlesque, the film, is now a period piece
Oh
in a way
no.
with all these messages. What a period
Oh
drama.
no.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. At least we could call it like a contemporary period piece. I don't
Yeah,
know. Oh
of
my
course.
goodness. Oh, okay. Well, this is such a cool detail that I would not have clocked. What else do you have on this list of yours?
Okay, so I also shout out to, of course, all the fun, legendary cameo actors. You have Alan Cumming running your door. Like that's so incredible. Alan Cumming running your door, doing a couple numbers that aren't even like the focus of the film. Like incredible. Stanley Tucci is always, delightful. Love him. God, I always like, again, looping back to the music, which is so fun and great. I have to give a shout out to this film for, in the film, they have a live band, which I think is a really nice touch because a lot of burlesque history, especially classic burlesque, would have live music, especially like in the early days. And there's a couple places in New York specifically that I work with quite often that have a live band, which I think is so special for burlesque historically because that's how it all started. So I so appreciate that in the film, they have their little band for their numbers and then I know the girls have tracks as well, but there are many shows that do that too. So I'm like, oh, okay, like that's cool because they could have just had tracks, they could have just been in a club, but I appreciate that they had a band because I think that historically for burlesque, that's very, very important. I will say that I look at the set for burlesque and it's so beautiful. You have the beautiful ruched curtains and you have that, classic burlesque lighting, those purples and pinks and blues. But it's so funny because those gigs and those venues do exist, but a lot of burlesque, especially in New York, you're in a restaurant, you're doing a floor show, which is fabulous, but half the time we don't have the lighting and we don't have, the big stages all the time. And being a New York-based performer, whenever I go out of town, I was just in New Orleans this month, and you fill out the production asks you, they're like, what do you want for your lighting? And 90% of the time, I just say, I want to be seen. because because so much of burlesque, especially in New York, is very, down and dirty. You get maybe one spotlight with one gel that, pivots one way, and you're only going to hit it for like 30 seconds of your song while you work the room. It's so I just the production value of the movie Burlesque makes me giggle because it's like, they're trying to be this like seedy club in California that's like, off the, kind of off the beaten path with this beautiful neon sign. I'm like, this place is gorgeous. If we all worked here, like, my God, I mean, burlesque is already so fun and like, the venues are so great, but half of it, especially, we don't have those budgets. And I mean, you go into the club, and I mean, the fact that they have like, they have the sound guy with the, I mean, it's like really professional stuff. I'm like, this is like a Broadway show. I would love that for us more often. But I'm just like, I'm like, this is a big club. This is a Broadway show.
I was going to ask, I mean, because you've been to so many venues to do this, right? How often this venue in the movie is called Burlesque Lounge, which suggests to me that this is what they do. Like, this band maybe was there to perform between the burlesque acts, but burlesque was absolutely like the number one focus
Mm.
of the entertainment that they had. How often, when you're going to venues to do this yourself, are the venues you're going to like dedicated towards, let's say, burlesque versus it's just, like one of the many things that they could do for entertainment?
In New York specifically, we're pretty lucky.
Mhm.
We have places like Duane Park, which is actually it's billed as a burlesque supper club. So when you come to Duane Park to have dinner, it's a very high end, very fancy live band, but burlesque is the draw. So that's pretty cool. You have spots like the Slipper Room, which is a variety theater. They have variety, but burlesque is again one of the bigger pulls there because that's where you can go to see it. Um, so in New York, there's definitely a hand. Those two are like I think the biggest ones that I can think of. We also have the places like House of Yes. Coney Island is very, very heavily known for burlesque as well. New York, we're pretty lucky. We still have a lot of the old ties to vaudeville and all that stuff and interest in it. But then there are the venues where I think burlesque is a very big draw, but they are not, built for it. So I'm going to say in New York, maybe like 80%, maybe 70% we have of like burlesque is like what it's known for. And then maybe the rest is, very beautiful spaces or restaurants that have entertainment.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, that's maybe even a higher percentage than I thought. So, thriving culture in New York, it sounds like.
Yeah, COVID. I mean, I'm not going to fib. COVID was really hard for us. There was quite a few places that, um, did shut down or, took a hiatus. But I feel like we're hanging on and coming back, which is good. It's been a slow, a slow and steady climb, which is good.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Well, okay. So, the set, boy, would it be nice to have something that was so purpose built as this was in the movie. Okay. Are there other things on your list?
Okay. Let me see. Oh yes. So there is Christina's big moment in the movie. I love. I think of that the villain Nikki, her nemesis Nikki in the film. There's she's like late to everything, by the way, which always blows my mind and makes me very uncomfortable. Like as a performer, I'm like, who does that? You know what I mean? I'm talking like there's a scene where she like missed her whole first number and then like decides to show up for her second number. I'm like, that would never fly. At least in New York, like people would be like, is she alive? Is she okay? Anyway, I digress. I just think that that's just the funniest thing. But I think of the moment where like Nikki gets like fired, fired. And Cher's like, get out of here. And she's like, Christina, you're on. And like throws the outfit at her. She gets in her little outfit. And, these three girls, they go out to do the number. And then Kristen Bell, Nikki, she like goes in the back and, like pulls the cord. So all the music goes out for these girls because they're lip singing. And, it's just all the drama, the close up on, Kristen Bell looking like the ultimate villain. And then, Christina Aguilera a cappella like brings the house down, starts singing that number. And I just think there's something so delicious about that because it's like that her biggest nemesis actually gave her like the biggest opportunity to take the next step in her career. And I just think that that's like delicious. I love that moment for her and it's so absurd. Like the whole thing is just so absurd. But I love that, and I think that a lot of performers, I don't wish that moment for anyone. I don't wish that moment, when you're on stage and something goes wrong for anyone. But I think as performers doing live performance, I mean, sometimes when things go wrong is when you grow the most, or you really have a really special moment for yourself where you're like, wow, I am not afraid of anything. I'm ready for the next thing. I actually had my music go out on me at a big festival in New York in September, and my music went out, and I literally had my pantaloons around my ankles. Like I literally like had these like fluffy underwear, and the music went out, and I remember I was just like standing. It was at Sony Hall, this big venue, beautiful, filled, and the music goes out. And luckily it was a comedic number, but I felt so empowered by that moment. And I remember I actually was so calm and I was so ready. And I just improvised. And then eventually the music came back on and I finished my number. And I remember being like, wow, I am really proud of that. And it was almost like that moment in Burlesque when Christina Aguilera is on stage and her music goes out and she overcame it. And I think that that's anyone can, get down with that lesson, but I think for performers specifically, that's like a really powerful moment to see on screen and to remember and also to experience in real life. So that is definitely another moment of burlesque that I love.
What a fun take.
Yeah.
I mean, I love that scene as well. And what always strikes me is a different thing from what struck you. It's just this idea that it's right around that time that I realized that the world of this movie has actually really sucked me in because this is Christina Aguilera on screen.
Yes.
She's not Allie. She's like she's made it.
Yes.
She is
Yes.
fine. But in that moment I fully believe that it's just like Allie's just like trepidatiously seizing this moment that's been presented to her.
Oh yeah.
And that the people around her are actually surprised. And then I'm like, wait, no, it's Chris, but I first go to the real world that this movie is creating for us, or the
Totally.
world that the movie is creating versus the real world that we're in. But I love the way that you framed it of like, her biggest nemesis is the one who gave her the biggest opportunity. Take that, Kristen Bell.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
good. Nikki
So funny.
she didn't plan this one all the way out.
Yeah. Didn't think it all the way through.
Oh my gosh. Okay, okay. This is good. I'm very curious. When the number went out, when the music went out in your number, did you continue where you were and then did the music pick up where you wanted it to when it did pick up?
Oh, this is the best. So the music went out, and when you're on stage, anything that happens like that feels like an eternity. But in reality, it was really about 35 seconds, 35 seconds to 40 seconds. But on stage, that's an eternity. And I feel like I just waited for the music. And I did it in a way where like I just kind of leaned into the silence, like literally, like, and mind you, like I have, fluffy underwear around my ankles. So I'm kind of like on my knee, like waiting, and then I'm like, I remember I was like stretching, and I was just like looking around. But it was like filled. It was like a filled moment. I remember being like, um, very positive about it and very like, hey, you're all waiting with me, so let's all wait together. And then when the music did kick back on, unfortunately, it did not kick back on where I had left off, but it had kicked on a few uh stanzas back, if you will. So what I did is I mimed everything that I had already done up until that point where my underwear is on on my ankles. And it went over great. I mean, I even had, I think I did this like with my legs, and it was very funny and fun. I had fun. And that was also, I think, a really empowering thing is like something like that gets thrown at you, and it's like, how can I have fun with this? Because it's also like, you can't take yourself so seriously all the time. And again, like I do think I'm like, what if this was like a serious number? Something very, emotional and heavy. And I don't know, but even then you still have to like have fun with whatever's being thrown at you. So yeah, the audience went on that ride for sure. They were very, very sweet. I also think audiences live for that kind of stuff,
I
because
I was in the improv comedy world for a while, not as a performer, but as I did drop-ins and I would go to a lot of performances, and the best stuff was always the mistakes. That's the stuff you remember. Um, it's the and not because, oh, that was so bad, but because like, oh, that was so special.
yep,
Like I'll never see that again.
yep.
Um, and there's something very unique about the unplanned and being able to roll with it. So it's really cool that even in an environment where you have things very planned, there is room to like figure out on the fly what happens when something goes wrong.
Oh, 100%. And I think that's so cool that you know, do the comedy, do the improv. It's such a great thing to, even if you don't ever do it professionally. I tell people ask me new people who are interested in getting into burlesque or people who are like looking to add something to their burlesque. I'm like, listen, take an improv class. Honest to God, it will do nothing but serve you and get you out of your head. Because even, all planned performances, they do need to have that part of them that is thrown away. Meaning, like, you've put in so much of whatever work, whatever medium it is, and then it just, you know, you kind of throw it and say, hey, let's see what happens, guys,
Yeah.
especially in live performance. So it's important. It's a really like, I can't push that enough with people. I'm like, definitely try it. Even if you hate it, I think it'll get your gears going on like a very important ingredient to like live performance.
I think like in life, when you can't really have confidence until you actually know that you're resourceful. Like
Yes.
until you have actual proof that you can do things that are hard, it's hard to have real confidence. And I think one of the things that like improv allows for performers is being like, you know what? I don't know what's going to happen if something goes wrong, but I know that I will find a way through it. And I think it can give you that extra like that level of confidence that you need to do the thing you planned, but to know that if something goes wrong, you can handle it because you've handled it in the past. So it's an interesting thing. And to circle it back to burlesque, I mean, that's exactly what happened for Ali in this song for Tough Lover. So it's such a good scene for a lot of reasons. But I like your standpoint on it, that it really was like her nemesis gave her the big moment.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
good.
Her little face sitting in the back of that theater feeling so accomplished by
Yeah.
being so terrible. It's delicious. It really is. Oh God, it's such a good one. I
Yeah.
love it. I love
Oh
it.
my gosh. Well, is there anything else on your list?
I think off the top of my head, I have one more thing, a bit of a throwaway, but it's just like really iconic. The scene where Nikki and Cher's character have like their big fight in the parking lot, and she's in her like she has like the fanciest car. I think it's like a Porsche. Basically, like I'm like, how does a performer have this car? Anyway, she's like driving away from Cher, and she's like, by the way, I slept with your husband after your honeymoon, or some throwaway line, and she drives away. And then there's a cutaway shot of Cher, like who just happens to have her trunk open. I think she's putting something, and she grabs like a crowbar and like breaks as she's driving away, like breaks Kristen Bell's window. I'm like, it's you can't I mean you can write that stuff because it's in the film. But the fact but the, but the fact that Cher's like, okay, and it's just like quick. It's so quick that it always makes me giggle because I mean she breaks her window and she's like, ah, and then just drives away. I'm like, that's the scene. You know what I mean? Like,
Lining up mirrors for makeup during the day or during the night, and then during the day, smashing
yeah,
windows with crowbars. This is
yeah.
Cher.
Yeah, so I think, so Cher, yeah, Cher with the crowbar is, I guess, my final moment I'd love to touch on because it was such a move. It was
I
it's
mean,
so
it's a power move, no
yeah,
question. That's
yeah, yeah.
it.
That'll do. That'll do. Yeah.
It's like, what do you think she meant? No.
Yeah. What's the subtext there? Yeah.
Oh my goodness. What a fun list. I
Yeah.
love that you've got stuff that um both things that you'd kind of only know from the community that you're in, and also things that like anybody watching the film, like the smashing of the window with the crowbar, like anybody could see that's badass. But it's so fun. You have such a balanced list, and I love the fact that this movie feels like it's part of your own origin story and the world that you're in. So there's something special about that.
Yeah. And I haters gonna hate. I know a lot of people are like, they don't really do burlesque in the movie. And I get it, but I'm like, but it's burlesque has a fringe quality. And I mean, a lot of mainstream stuff, like at that time, like the nudity, you gotta dip a toe. You know what I mean? Like, you can't, with burlesque, again, I think it reached a lot of people who then looked it up and they're like, what is this burlesque? Because I love the glamour. I love the makeup and the aesthetic, and I love the dancing and the acts are so cool. Like, let me know more. And then they learn about, you know, real burlesque, and they learn about like the whole scene. And I think that that's a really cool, powerful thing. And also, like, who doesn't love a small town girl going to a big city and living her dream? I think a lot of people, that's a tale as old as time, and it's so good. It's a feel good story. So I am a fan. It actually feels good to say that out loud. I am a fan of the film. I'm a burlesque dancer, and I am a fan of the movie. Also,
We're owning it here.
exactly. Burlesque has so much comedy and camp to it. I'm like, guys, there's gold mines here for us to
Hmm.
laugh at and to parody. But again, I'm for any ambassador going out into the world and being like, burlesque is really great. Look into it. And I think this film does a really, really good job of piquing people's interest and capturing the spirit of it for sure. And yeah, I've loved talking about it. So thank you for having me. It's really great to kind of revisit it and get also like for my mind, like getting specific on like all the little things that I love about it, and I really appreciate it.
Oh, what a fun exercise to do this with you. Before we go, is there anything, where can people find you? What do you have coming up? For those who discover this and want to discover burlesque or just want to see what the next thing that you're up to, where can they find you?
Sure. So my website is pearlsdaily.com. I try to keep it updated with kind of, what I'm up to and things like that. I have a couple residencies in New York. I'm at places like Duane Park, the Slipper Room, Bathtub Gin pretty regularly. I'm actually having a baby in May, so I will be taking a little bit of a maternity leave in May, but I'm going to be back with some exciting stuff. And the website is a great place to check me out and see where I update everything, and you can always catch me there. Or shoot me an email if you have any questions about burlesque or if I can be helpful in any way, I'm always open. My email is always open to questions.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. First of all, everybody be sure to check those things out because there's lots to do. But thank you so much, Pearls, for joining me and sharing your thoughts about Burlesque and helping us all find a new kind of appreciation for this movie.
Of course, it was a pleasure. It was lovely meeting you, and what fun. And I look forward to watching all your videos, but especially this one will be super fun.
Okay, everybody, you have heard what I love about the movie Burlesque. You've heard what Jezebelle Thunder, you've heard what Pearls Daily love about this movie and what strikes them about this movie. And now we just need to hear from you. So please jump into the comments. What's on your list? What do you love about the movie Burlesque? So this is your chance to share all the things that you enjoy about this film or all the things that you want to share about this film. And that's it. So next time, now that you've gotten through this supersized video, next time is going to be day 8. And we're going to talk about Crazy Rich Asians from 2018. I would say this is probably one of the more recent films on the list. This starred Constance Wu, Henry Golding, Michelle Yeoh, Gemma Chan, Awkwafina, Ken Jeong. And it is my guest, such a good guest for this movie. It is the one and only Kevin Kwan, who is the author of Crazy Rich Asians. So I'm a big fan of Kevin. I really enjoy Kevin as a person and was so glad to get his thoughts on that film. So don't miss that one. Crazy Rich Asians is coming up tomorrow. And I hope you'll join me. And in the meantime, go out there, everybody. Happy Rom-Com Month. Go enjoy some movies. Get love. Get donuts. Bye.